Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Jakarta, Indonesia. Welcome to the international webinar on the road to the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Women, Women's Participation in the Digital Economy. This webinar today is hosted by the Indonesian Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Republic of Indonesia, in collaboration with MicroSave Consulting, MSC, and organized by Inke Maris and Associates Consultants. This webinar is part of the 4th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Women as a platform for the ASEAN policy dialogue in promoting women's economic empowerment in rapidly evolving digital economy. We welcome and thank everyone for attending our webinar today. On this very occasion, allow me to welcome Her Excellency Ibu Bintang Puspayoga, Minister for Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Republic of Indonesia. Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. Professor Akiko Yamanaka, Special Advisor to the President of ERIA, former Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, and Special Ambassador for Peacebuilding of Japan. Ibu Leni and Rosalind, ASEAN Committee on Women, ACW, Vice Chair, and the Deputy Minister for Gender Equality in the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Republic of Indonesia. Jamie M. Zimmerman, Gender Lead, Financial Services for the Poor, Global Growth and Opportunity, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Cecilia Tinonin, Statistics Specialist, UN Women, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Chandra Sugarda as our moderator today. Ladies and gentlemen, before commencing with the program of the day, may I have your attention for Indonesia's national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, this international webinar on women's participation in the digital economy aimed to promote and strengthen understanding and prompt response of ASEAN leaders, policy practitioners and advocates, academics, and relevant stakeholders on women's participation and their economic empowerment in the context of digital economy. The webinar is also designed to showcase ASEAN and outside ASEAN's best practices and experiences, as well as challenges of digital and financial inclusion advocacies. To begin our webinar today, we invite Her Excellency Ibu Bintang Puspayoga, Minister for Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Republic of Indonesia, to deliver the first keynote speech. Please welcome Minister Bintang Puspayoga.
Her Majesty Queen Maxima Surrogate Cerruti of the Netherlands, United Nations Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, Her Excellency Miss Melinda and friends from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance Republic of Indonesia, Honorable resource person and participant of this webinar from 10 ASEAN member states, good morning from Jakarta, and my health and peace be upon all of us. It's an honor for us at the Indonesian Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection to hold this very important webinar on women and digital economy. This webinar is a series of events of the 4th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Women. We mix digital economy and financial inclusion, the theme of current ASEAN Ministerial Meeting. We are confident that this is relevant and pivotal with what the Southeast Asian countries and the world face today, as the world is changing very fast toward this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia currently has 270.2 million population, making us the 4th most populated countries in the world, and in the same time, the most populated ASEAN member state. Our women occupy nearly half of the numbers, with 54% of them are in productive ages. There are potential for our economic growth if opportunities are widened and support are provided. However, we currently face development challenges in the form of gender gap. Global Gender Gap Report noted that Indonesia has overall gender gap of 69%, putting us on 101 rank globally in the last years. This year, we experienced positive move with decrease in the gap, which is 65%. Nevertheless, gap still remains, as we still have small percentage of women participate in the labor force, which is 56% compared to 84% than that of men. Large gap in income for women, which is 52% compared to 70% of that of men. Huge percentage of women working in informal sector, which is 82% compared to 79% of men. Ladies and gentlemen, as world is moving to digital economy, doing business with internet are unavoidable. We do realize that internet is opportunity to improve the business. Toward this end, our women are moving faster than their men colleagues. Data shows that 54% of our women-owned micro business use internet, compared to 39% of men-owned micro business. This seems like a coping strategy of women to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. We also note that women take strategy step of doing product diversification. Research shows that women-owned micro businesses are likelier to diversify and move into different sector, location of product, compared to those that are owned by men. In terms of financial literacy, we have positive trend where account ownership increased at an equal rate of 6% among both men and women. However, less women use financial service than that of men. The good news in the last year, there was an increase of women using financial service, and this is a good start for us to boost financial inclusion toward gender equality in this area. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of our continuous effort to advance women's status, we currently have flagship program consisting of 5 priority programs to improve the status and support our women. This program is presidential priorities on women empowerment and child protection, which consists of increasing women empowerment in gender perspective entrepreneurship, improving the roles of mothers and family in child education and care, reducing all violence against women and children, reducing child labor, and preventing child marriage. When it comes to the first priority of women economic empowerment, we have currently some strategies including making gender a central issue, Indonesian strategy of financial inclusion, collaborate with relevant stakeholders, ministry, development sector, private sector, NGOs, and academia to provide gender-sensitive entrepreneurship training and business assistantship. Supporting women MSMEs to cope with the current global pandemic and support access to low-interest rate credit. The Indonesian government has several women's empowerment programs aimed at vulnerable women, women as headed household, women as victims of disaster and violence. For instance, our ministry and PT PNM Persero, one of the state-owned enterprises, a program to provide financing for underprivileged women and also provide assistance to achieve Indonesia 5 gender equality priorities. In this program, there are more than 10 million female customers and beneficiaries spread across all provinces. The program also involves approximately 45,000 account advisors. They will provide access to funding and coaching for women. We also created a leadership program for women in rural areas to be able to voice their aspiration and have the opportunity to become village official and all leaders. Why those in rural areas? Because most of our people live in this area and many of our women are experiencing lots of gender-based problems. This leadership program also provides soft skills for female local leaders to increase the role of women in the overall decision-making process. In the context of digital empowerment, the ministry has collaborated with the private sector to provide digital training for women entrepreneurs. We also organize a digital and business literacy training for women in the home industry, including digital and financial literacy, operational skill, and accessing new markets. COVID-19 is forcing businesses to adapt more quickly to the digital era. With new skill and knowledge, these female leaders can play a key role in helping themselves and their communities recover from the economic impact of the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, before I close my statement, I would like to give my appreciation to MicroSave, who makes this webinar happen, and also for the opportunity to deliver our program related to strengthening women empowerment through digital economy. When women are empowered and children are well protected, prosperity will be available for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Bintang Puspayoga, for the keynote speech. Now we invite Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia, to deliver the second keynote speech. Please welcome Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Women, which is conducted today, and in this webinar to discuss a very important topic, women participation in digital economy, the ASEAN Policy Dialogue for promoting women economic empowerment in rapidly evolving digital economy post the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important topic. Today, we are facing the pandemic, which is still ongoing and a challenge for many policymakers. How we are going to address the issue of the pandemic, which is creating a challenge and a threat for many households and people all over the world. And the health threat definitely also have the asymmetric impact to women, because most of the worker in the health sector dominated by also women. And the fact that people all over the world have to work at home or from home, it's also have an asymmetric impact, especially for women. And if we combine today with this pandemic, in which digital economy playing a more important role, this is going to be an opportunity for all of us to push the gender equality agenda for all countries in the world. The digital revolution also offers Indonesia an opportunity to fast-track the economic development. Importantly, to ensure that our economic growth is inclusive. With the digital technology, there will be a more equal opportunity. And this is going to have a positive benefit, especially for women. Digital financial services are important facet of this digital revolution. And that's why for Indonesia, we are investing a lot and significant, especially triggered by this pandemic, the infrastructure to make sure that the connectivity with the digital technology can be enjoyed for all the people of Indonesia, especially in the remote area and the lag behind region. And this is going to also create a much better equal opportunity, especially for Indonesia women. Women in Indonesia is a key economic agent. Having an equal access to digital financial product, digital technology and services will definitely improving and strengthening their role as an economic agent, not only in their own household, but also for the whole economy. We all know that the gender equality is an integral part of sustainable development goals. This is the goals number 5, which emphasize the aspiration to achieve gender equality and empowering all women and girls. This aspiration or the goals definitely is not an easy one. Each country in the world have a very specific challenge that need to be addressed, whether this is coming from their legislation or coming from their cultural or other aspect. According to one study, the McKinsey back in 2015, advancing women equality could add around 12 trillion US dollar, or this is equal to 11% to the annual GDP by 2025. The report from the McKinsey also emphasizing that equal access, including financial access, could promote not only the women in their participation in the economy, but it also promote and strengthen the growth of the economy. So to reach financial equality, I believe that boosting women financial inclusion to reach financial equality is very, very critical. We realize that women access to formal financial services will also enhance and strengthen women family life. They can manage money better. They can also access to capital much more efficient and less costly. This will in turn will reduce the risk of the household to falling under the poverty line and also providing a very strong opportunity for women to be able to work and capitalizing the market, while at the same time juggling to taking care of their house and the children. This is going to be a very important factor to create a better equality. Therefore, women financial inclusion will definitely a very important and significant positive related to the progress, not only in creating equality itself, but in reducing poverty and also boosting economic growth. According to the World Bank Global Findex database, there is still a gender gap of 7% on 2017 globally. The Financial Inclusion Index for women is only 65%, while for men, they've already reached 72%. So narrowing this gap, it's going to have an important impact for not only women, the household, but also for the whole economy. So the question now is how we are going to improve the participation and access of the economic opportunity for women, especially with the digital technology, which is now currently becoming a widespread platform. Based on the latest World Bank Global Financial Index for Indonesia, the Women Financial Inclusion Index is 5% higher than men and reaching 51%. According to our national survey on financial literacy and inclusion, women in Indonesia have a financial literacy index 4% lower than men, and women financial inclusion index is 2% lower than men. This definitely have a lot to do with the fact that the economy still dominated by informal sector. Within this informality, women becoming more vulnerable, whether this is in the form of lower income or also at the same time a hardship. There are also lack of social protection. And that's why we are going to invest more on this digital technology and financial literacy so that women in Indonesia have a much better opportunity to improve their livelihood and definitely also to protect themselves as well as family. We are all now have many programs which is aiming for the small medium enterprises. But the majority of the small medium enterprises, especially also in informal sector, dominated by the woman as a player as well as an owner of the business. The government, in this case, providing a lot of support. The small, or we call it ultra micro support credit, which is not only subsidized, but also providing capacity building. They are all dominated or majority are women. We have the UMI, that is the ultra micro investment or credit for especially women. We also have the credit, small credit, which is subsidized. Again, this is also dominated by women. All this support combined with the investment on the digital technology, infrastructure, as well as financial literacy will hopefully boosting the woman participation in the economy, but most importantly, will provide equal opportunity for the woman to be able to improve their life and livelihood. On the Indonesia social assistance is also implemented with the gender lens in their design as well as the implementation of the policy. Our family hope, which is consists of 10 million family receiving government social assistance, they are mainly received by the woman as the head of household. This is because they are all more using these resources dedicated for the well-being of their children. We also providing this assistance through the digital cash transfer, meaning that we are also promoting financial inclusion for especially the lowest income household in Indonesia. This is all again policy of the government on the social front, but we put it the gender lens as well as the financial inclusion. If you combine this social assistance with the support from the government in the form of credit, then you are going to have a much better complete financial inclusion. Not only that they are opening the saving, but they are also starting to access of the capital and also technical assistance so that their business is going to get better and thrive. The Minister of Finance, in this case, which is providing the budget support for the poor and the most vulnerable, is also providing this and designing the policy together with the line ministry with the gender perspective in mind. Let me share you how the Indonesia is promoting the gender equality, social inclusion, and at the same time also investing in or using the digital financial technology to make a significant progress. I think we have to address 4 areas of concern. First, financial product and services. How we are going to be able to provide a product that meet women's preference and characteristic. With the emergence of digital economy, there is definitely an opportunity for all of us to always diversify and designing a specific product that fit with women, especially when they have to juggle their life in taking care of the family and at the same time in the economy. The government of Indonesia and regulators encouraging digital innovations that could accelerate financial inclusion. Many of the government, not only social inclusion program, but also on the economic inclusion program, provided with the objective of empowering women as a head of household or as a player in economy. As I mentioned earlier, the program, for example, like Mekar, this is how we are going to provide technical assistance while at the same time also providing access to credit for many women business, small, medium enterprises, so that they are going to be able to get not only technical assistance, but also access to credit. We also introduced the smallest ultra micro credit. This is again dominated by the woman as a recipient. By 2020, our ultra micro program has allocated 3.2 for the 3.2 million women. These are 93% of the total recipient. The second element for all of us to be able to push the gender equality, social inclusion, and using the digital economy is, of course, providing digital financial education. Again, financial literacy is very important. We are all need to make sure that the digital education or digital financial education will be simple enough for especially women to be able to understand quickly and make a better use, not only the digital technology, but also financial product. Government of Indonesia since 2020 has launched what we call it National Women Financial Inclusion Strategy. This strategy aiming to promote access to finance for Indonesia women in a way that accommodate women diverse needs, also their different interests and background. And the mission of this strategy is to provide a comprehensive gender responsive program to improve access to formal financial services, while at the same time ensuring all Indonesia women are equipped with financial skill, or in this case, digital finance literacy. As the National Women Financial Inclusion Strategy, which is launched as a product for all of us to be able to translate the political commitment to become a concrete program and action. Women in Indonesia who has the knowledge, capacity, and opportunity to grow is going to be a plus, or in this case, a positive factor, not only to create equality, but also in strengthening the resiliency of economic growth in Indonesia. Our commitment to provide fair and inclusive financial services and program which is responsive to women needs and taking into account various gender barriers, including the need or the fact that many women have to take care of their household and also their vulnerability to the poverty, including discriminatory social form, will definitely require a lot of innovative approach in terms of product as well as the financial digital technology that can access directly to this woman. The third element, which is also equally important to push forward gender equality, social inclusion, is from the regulatory as well as the policy framework. Government and regulators should provide equal treatment in the level of policy and regulation. Why we have to make sure that this is an equal treatment? Because many women, the fact they are facing a much more obstacle and hindrance, whether this is coming from family norm, social norm, or even from the legislation, creating additional barrier for many women to be able to participate in the economic activity. So under the leadership of President Jokowi, we have introduced several policies to further and to make a progress on this gender equality, especially removing the obstacle for women to participate in the economy and especially in their access to finance. Many government programs, especially on the health and education and social protection, including our funding directly to the village level, directly or indirectly will benefit girls and women. As a finance minister, I also has already implemented gender responsive budgeting, especially to address gender bias and discrimination. A step still need to be taken toward accountability of women's rights, but also on a greater transparency, which can shape economic policy that hopefully will create a real progress for social equality. And the last one is, of course, all this gender equality, social inclusion, as well as financial inclusion can only be made possible when we have adequate and proper infrastructure in place, especially the infrastructure on the ICT. This is because the digital economy can only be achieved when the technology can be accessed by all people equally, in this case equally, and especially for women. For Indonesia, with the big geographic coverage, the investment on the ICT is very, very important. The remote area or the poor area, they need to make sure that they have the ability to access to the digital technology. Our budget is allocated this infrastructure, especially on the digital technology, so that we are going to be able to provide equal opportunity, especially in the remote area. So these are all, is a very critical element for all of us to be able to achieve gender equality, social inclusion, and using digital technology to push even more forward and faster the financial, social, and gender equality, social inclusion, financial inclusion, and gender equality. But this work and the challenge that we are facing need a collaboration of all stakeholders. The synergy and collaboration among all parties is critical, and learning from other countries or other areas which make a lot of progress is going to be equally powerful. I do hope that this webinar is going to provide an opportunity for all countries in ASEAN, whether this is policymaker, regulator, or player, to be able to learn from each other. What area that we can push further to make a progress? What area that we have to address in order for us to be able to provide a better equality, whether this is on the gender lens perspective or on the financial inclusion. I do hope you are all having a very productive and constructive meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati. And next, may we take a moment for a photo opportunity. I want to invite all speakers and moderator in the Zoom room to take a photo. Please look at the camera and smile. And one more time. 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you. Great, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will move on to begin the panel discussion. I would like to invite Chandra Sugarda, Gender, Disability, and Social Inclusion Specialist as our moderator today.
Thank you, Fina. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Following the insightful keynote speeches, our panel discussion will delve deeper into gender-responsive digital economies and discuss ways to promote women economic empowerment through inclusive digital economy post the COVID-19 pandemic. 4 distinguished speakers will join me for the discussion. The first speaker is Professor Akiko Yamanaka, Special Advisor to the President of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia ERIA, former Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs and Special Ambassador for Peace Building of Japan. Welcome, Professor. The second speaker is Ms. Leni Rosalind, ASEAN Committee on Women, ACW Vice Chair and Deputy Minister for Gender Equality at the Ministry of Women, Empowerment and Child Protection, Republic of Indonesia. Good morning, Ibu Leni. Our next speaker is Ms. Jamie Zimmerman. She is the Gender Lead on Financial Services for the Poor, Global Growth and Opportunity at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Great to have you with us, Jamie. And our fourth speaker is Ms. Cecilia Tinonin, who is joining us from Italy. She is a statistics specialist at the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Welcome, Cecilia. Now, each speakers will be given 10 minutes to deliver their presentations. That will be the starting point of our discussion. I will perform another duty as timekeeper for the presentation session, so I will be reminding speakers when their time is almost up. And I understand that registered participants have submitted their questions as well, and then I will be providing them to the panelists for the discussion. Now, without further ado, let me invite the first speaker, Professor Akiko Yamanaka, who will set the tone by discussing evidence and insights on impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women in the ASEAN region. Professor Akiko currently serves as the President of International Tsunami Disaster Prevention Society, Senior Diplomatic Fellow of Cambridge Central Asia Forum of Cambridge University, and Special Advisor to the Mayor of Sapporo. Prior to her current role, she served as former Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs and Special Ambassador for Peace Building of the Japanese government, as well as Special Ambassador for Awareness of the World Tsunami. Professor Akiko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chandra, for your introduction. Her Excellency Bintang Puspayoga, Her Excellency Sri Mulyani Indrawati, and distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to be here at this very important and timely discussion. Since the beginning of the pandemic at ERIA, we have been actively in researching, analyzing how this global health and economic crisis is affecting women across ASEAN. Today, I'm going to present some of our key findings so far. Slide. As during other pandemics throughout history, women globally and across ASEAN have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and are more at the risk of losing their jobs than men. That is for many reasons. Women tend to overrepresented in sectors heavily affected by the pandemic, such as tourism and hospitality, and or at risk from automation, a phenomenon that the pandemic may accelerate, such as retail, textile, clothing, and footwear. Another reason is that the majority of women entrepreneurs across ASEAN runs or manages micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, in other words, MSMEs, which are significantly more at risk of bankruptcy in times of economic downturns like pandemic times, compared with larger firms for which access to capital is less of a constraint. Slide. I can't see the slide, but anyway, I will continue. Women also have less access to opportunities linked to the digital economy, and this is of critical importance given the rapid acceleration of the digital economy across ASEAN. Many of the post-pandemic recovery jobs will be digital-related or digital-enabled. However, so far, the ASEAN digital economy success story has predominantly benefited men. Women, especially in rural areas, do not have access to the same opportunities, and risk continues to be worse of the future, thus enlarging the digital gender divide across ASEAN. Addressing this divide represents both a social imperative and an economic opportunity, as an increased participation of women in the digital economy can significantly contribute to the post-pandemic economic recovery. A growing body of research also points the fact that diversity, including gender diversity, fosters creativity and innovation, which are very needed to find solutions to complex problems like the ones we are currently facing during the pandemic. Compared with other regions in Asia, ASEAN countries have relatively high levels of digital gender equality with respect to basic access metrics. Various metrics and assessments score ASEAN member state higher than the Asia Pacific average on the measure of gender digital inclusion. For instance, computer use is very even between male and females. The same is broadly true for mobile phone use and internet use. Slide. However, evidence shows that women lag behind in terms of participation in more advanced types of access to the digital economy, in particular access to skills entrepreneurship opportunities, and leadership positions. Even if the situation is improving, ASEAN girls and women are still underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so-called STEM, education, jobs, and career opportunities. When technology-related programs such as STEM, ICT, and engineering are separated out, it becomes clear that women in science are specializing more in the health sciences and much less in technology and math-oriented programs. Moreover, high female education in technical fields does not appear to translate into equally high female representation in related professions. Women have limited representation in advanced technology jobs that require higher skill levels and are better paying. While the number of women entrepreneurs across ASEAN was growing before the COVID-19 pandemic, the majority of ASEAN women entrepreneurs owns and manages MSMEs with more limited use of sophisticated digital tools, if any. This means that women entrepreneurs across ASEAN are less likely to be able to compete and thrive in the digital economy. It is not enough for women to have jobs in the digital economy. The types of jobs also matter. In particular, the ability of women to progress into top management and policymaking roles determines the extent to which women can have an equal voice in the development of systems that affect their lives. Furthermore, there are economic benefits to including women in decision-making positions. A recent study found that companies with more than 30% female board members performed better financially than companies with no female board members. However, research in different contexts points to lack of women in top management and executive positions in ASEAN. To increase participation in the digital economy, it is also critically important to provide a safe environment for women and girls. This involves fighting cyber violence, discrimination, biases, and stereotypes affecting women. Moreover, artificial intelligence and machine learning tools depend on data to train the algorithm that run their processes. The quality and representativeness of the training data therefore shape the type of knowledge the system acquires. This can have serious consequences when the systems are used for automated decision-making. Already evidence is emerging that algorithms tend to have embedded racial and gender biases that lead to discrimination. To promote and increase the participation of women in the ASEAN digital economy, policymakers across the region may wish to consider the following steps. First, policymakers need to reject cyber violence and fight potential discrimination biases and stereotype that exacerbate the digital gender divide. Second, policy program supporting the post-pandemic economic recovery in ASEAN need to explicitly make reference to the digital gender divide and include initiatives to narrow it. Third, the business sector has an important role to play to promote equal participation of women in the digital economy. This is why public-private partnerships and collaborations are critical in this respect. Fourth, There is growing need to invest and focus efforts not only on basic digital access, but also on more advanced types of access to the digital economy, including STEM skills, jobs, and careers, leadership positions, and data-driven entrepreneurship. Finally, I'd like to introduce 3 key phrases to remember. 1, ensuring social resilience. 2, addressing common interests. 3, establishing an age of balance. Working and working together will build a much safer world community with providing education, lifelines, and even infrastructure support, regardless of any differences in race, religion, color of skin, and nationality, and can only make the world stronger and more resilient. In closing, let me introduce the words of late Letishina Ramos Shahani, the Secretary General of the UN Decade of Women's World Conference in Nairobi, 1985. Later, she became Senator of the Philippines, and I became Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, and we worked together for the Vocational Training Center for Women. She said, "Peace is not the situation where there is no war. It is women who can teach our children the reality of war and peace as genuine teachers. True development is social, cultural, and political, as well as economics. Equality between men and women is not simply the absence of discrimination. Rather, equality means granting women the right, opportunity, and responsibility to take part in their own development. Let us build a foundation of strong ethics in every society that respect healthy human lives for all its citizens at COVID-19 era, which extends to all members of the world society together." I thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Akiko. I think there are some key information here, including the importance of narrowing the digital gender divide and also creating safe digital environment for women and girls to promote more inclusion of women, girls, and other vulnerable groups. Now, next, I invite Mrs. Leni Rosalind to deliver her presentation. She will be taking us forward or towards ASEAN's priorities, strategies, and commitment in accelerating women's economic empowerment in the region. Ms. Leni currently serves as ASEAN Committee on Women Vice Chair, with a mandate to support the chair to oversee and coordinate ASEAN's cooperation on promoting gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. She also serves as Deputy for Gender Equality at the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection. Mrs. Leni, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Chandra. Her Excellency, Ibu Bintang Puspayuga, Minister for Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, Republic of Indonesia. Her Excellency, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. Representatives from ASEAN Secretariat, ASEAN sectoral bodies, and ASEAN dialogue partners, honorable resource persons from ERIA, we have Prof. Akiko here, from UNSGSE, from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, and of course, all participants of this webinar from 10 ASEAN member states, and special thanks to MicroSave Consulting. Greetings from Jakarta, and may health and peace be upon all of us. First of all, allow me to express our sincere appreciation and warmest welcome to participants in this virtual webinar. I'm very pleased to know that we have important participants from both public and private sectors, as well as academia in this workshop, in this webinar. It shows the importance of the issue that we are about to discuss, issues related to women's digital financial inclusion to achieve gender equality in ASEAN member states. Today, as COVID-19 pandemic has brought significant consequences globally that extended well beyond the health realm. Please, next slide, please. Distinguished resource persons, participants, ladies and gentlemen. ASEAN, the group of 10 states in Southeast Asia, has currently 676.8 million population. It's the equivalent of 8.6% of world population. Women occupy nearly half of the total population. For Indonesia, especially the biggest country in the region, is currently inhabited by more than 270 million, with almost 50% of them are women. This makes the country as not only the most populated in ASEAN, but also the fourth most populated country in the world. It's only outnumbered by China, India, and the United States. Next slide, please. The high number of women in ASEAN is prospective when it comes to economic recovery and growth, provided that opportunity is widened and support is provided. In fact, ASEAN Development Bank study estimated that removal of gender inequality will improve aggregated income of about 6.6% and 14.5% after 1 or 2 generations, while corresponding per capita income will be higher by 30.6% to 70.1% in the hypothetical gender equality economy. We just heard from 2 ministers from their opening remarks that the high number of women in ASEAN is prospective when it comes to economic recovery and growth, with the condition that opportunity is widened and support is provided. Those 2 ministers underlined so many important points, and those are very fit to all of us in the ASEAN countries. We currently, next slide, please. We currently face big challenges in terms of gender equality and women empowerment. SDGs data by UN Women showed that 58% of ASEAN women earn less than their men counterpart, and maternity cash benefits reach only 33% of women. More women experience illness since the spread of COVID-19 virus, but only 70% of them are able to see doctors. 30% of women experience increase in domestic works compared to 16% of men. Men also 11.5 times more likely to be employed compared to women in ASEAN member states. And about 24% of young women are outside of education and employment compared to 13% of a young woman. Next slide, please. Digital economy and financial inclusion in ASEAN is outlined under AEC's Financial Sector Integration and ASEAN Digital Integration Framework. The 2 documents provide glimpse of ASEAN efforts to making financial integration inclusive and to expedite digital transformation. Trade innovation, seamless trade, digital payment, digital talents, and entrepreneurships are among priorities set to be achieved. Women as engines of economic growth is targeted group of these policies. Next slide, please. Data from UNCTAD 2019 and SCMP 2020 found that number of consumers using digital platforms in their transactions nearly tripled from 90 million to 250 million in 2018. And it kept growing to 310 million by the end of 2020. ASEAN is also one of the fastest growing internet user markets, with 125,000 new users joining the market every day. The COVID-19 pandemic has further accelerated the expansion of e-commerce to 20 up to 30%, especially in Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia. Despite high consumer of digital platform and fastest growing internet users, we are still far to achieve our ultimate goal of the realizations of gender equality in financial and digital sectors. As also explained by the Minister of Women Empowerment and Child Protection, as well as from the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, it's clearly that, to date, we are still struggling with digital and finance infrastructure, especially when it comes to women in rural and remote areas. And I think this happens also not only in Indonesia, but also in ASEAN member countries. Our women also need...
Ibu Leni?
Yes?
My apology, you have 3 more minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Our women also needs lots of trainings, capacity buildings, mentoring, and coaching on financial and digital literacies. We open for cross-country and cross-region collaboration to make the progress even bigger, to make the achievement more meaningful, to make our women play equally with their male fellows in a rapidly changing digital and financial world. Next, please. Next slide, please. Some of their major challenges are limited access of women to trainings and skills development, limited access of women to finance, strong division of labor force based on gender and gender stereotypes. Next slide, please. Our ministry just finished initial study on this related issue we discussed today, which is financial inclusion and digital economy in different countries in ASEAN. The study tries to see how financial inclusion and digital economy are differently formulated in different contexts across the region. We dig more on first the common challenges that many women face before economic transformation or digital economy, as well as linkages in terms of what are the key factors that may potentially widen gender inequality in the digital space. And the second challenge is why women lack access to financial institutions and have limited participation in digital economy, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery. Best practices in some ASEAN member states in the practice of digital economy and financial inclusion, and how the practice of digital economy and financial inclusion and how the country address the challenges of women and in assessing financial institution and enhancing participation in the digital economy. Next, please. I think from this study, we have finds, and you will see here that some challenges persist in digital economy, such as I mentioned also by those 2 ministers from Indonesia. First is about digital infrastructure, access to product and service, mastery in ICT, cultural barriers, as well as gender stereotypes and weak gender institutionalization. Next slide, please. The study also reveals some important things here, but I would like to underline the last point, which is women's access and participation to education and skills development of ICT, like the one happened in Singapore and Malaysia, are very high. The Singaporean government, in cooperation with educational institutions, has initiated programs that encourage the involvement of women in the STEM field. Next slide, please. The study recommends some key policy actions, including you will see from this slide about the increased gender responsive, and promote knowledge sharing, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, for us in Indonesia, next slide, please. Yeah, for us in Indonesia, 48% of SMEs, as we know, use internet to penetrate online market during pandemic. In this area, our women are moving faster than their men colleagues. Data shows that 54% of our women-owned micro business use internet compared to 39% of men-owned micro business. This seems that like a coping strategy of women to deal with COVID pandemic. We also note that women take strategic steps of doing products diversification. And this research shows that women-owned micro businesses are likelier to diversify and move into different sectors, locations, or products compared to those that are owned by men. I would like to...
Apology, Bu Leni. If you can wrap up because your 10 minutes is up. Thank you.
With said, I would like to share a bit in addition to what the Minister of Finance already explained, that we make it the central in the National Strategy of Financial Inclusion, as stated in the Presidential Regulation number 114 year 2020. So it's just issued last year, when women issues is strongly embedded in the policy, which is the form of presidential regulation. This year, our coordinating Minister of Economic Affairs also issued a circular letter to all government and financial institutions to request the formal use of women-owned business definition on their policies and programs. With the said, in the last slide, please. The last second. With the said presidential regulation, women is one of the main target of beneficiary, focusing on 7 priorities issues, namely women education and financial literacy, women MSMEs, women digital and financial service, access to insurance, consumer protection, as well as sex desegregated data. So this is this policy for Indonesia. I think if we are going to discuss and propose this to during the ASEAN minister meeting on women, so that other countries could adopt, or could use as a reference, because this is the first one in the region as well as in the world. That's where I have a special woman national strategy for financial inclusion with a specific for women, and the focus for women in the 40% lowest income groups, for the workers, as well as women as a household managers. So my last point in this regard, I do believe today's webinar will encourage a more inclusive and prolific conversation among participants. Thus, we can determine the efforts and policies to be implemented and adopted as a collaborative strategy among ASEAN member states to achieve gender equality in digital economy. Hopefully, our joint efforts will increase women's active involvement and access in all ASEAN member states. The good practices shown by both ASEAN countries and ASEAN as a common community demonstrates that the best strategy to overcome the challenges of the digital economy and financial inclusion is to build collaboration between multi-stakeholders, including the government, academia, the business sector, private sector, investor, community, and as well as the media, or we call pentahelix. So those are the things that I would like to share. And of course, the result from this webinar could be also part of the inputs for all the ASEAN member states country, while we are going to have the ministerial meeting from October 11 up to October 15. So that's all, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Leni. Ibu Leni have highlighted gender gap in ASEAN that is still prominent and experienced by women, especially in digital economy and financial inclusion, and provided brief update from Indonesia, including how the national strategy for financial inclusion targets women. Now, our next panelist is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ms. Jamie Zimmerman. She will discuss policy levers to accelerate women's participation in the digital economy. As gender lead at Financial Services for the Poor, Global Growth and Opportunity at the Foundation, Jamie's work focuses on increasing low-income women's economic empowerment through access to and usage of digital financial services. Prior to this position, she and her team focuses on cultivating partnership for global-scale digital financial inclusion. Jamie, your 10 minutes start right now.
Thank you, Ibu Chandra, for the kind introduction. I am so honored to be part of this event and to join this distinguished panel. Before I begin, I want to thank the Ministry for Women's Empowerment and Child Protection for inviting me and the Foundation here this morning, and congratulate them, as well as MicroSave, on hosting this session on such an important topic. I especially want to thank Their Excellencies, Ministers Puspayoga and Minister Indrawati, for their powerful words and strong leadership. And as well, of course, a thank you to my fellow panelists, Professor Yamanaka, Ibu Leni, and Ms. Tanonen. I am so glad to be here and to share this stage with you. So, distinguished guests, the Gates Foundation has never been more committed to women's economic inclusion and empowerment. Some of you may know that our co-chair, Melinda French Gates, recently announced the Foundation's Generation Equality Forum commitment of $2 billion over the next 5 years for causes critical to advancing gender equality around the globe. A crucial element of that is ensuring that women can participate and benefit from the digital economy. On my team, we focus on promoting access to and use of digital financial services and see digital financial inclusion as a key enabler of the emerging digital economy and, importantly, women's economic empowerment within it. Digital financial services can make it easier and safer for women to open accounts, to make and receive payments from customers or suppliers, to manage expenses and investments, to apply for loans, and so much more. Platforms like Grab and Gojek or e-commerce sites would not be possible without digital finance. And these companies and services are creating new opportunities for women, as well as introducing new risks. As development actors, as policymakers and regulators, as private sector innovators, we must invest right now in opportunities for women while defending against potential risks. And that includes the very real risk of women's exclusion altogether as economies digitize. So what are some ways that we're seeing the digital economy benefit women? Next slide, please. The digital economy is creating new kinds of jobs. It's changing existing jobs and changing entire sectors in really profound ways. We are seeing, for instance, that platform labor, like being a driver with Gojek or Grab or a housekeeper, can create employment opportunities and increase wages for women. One study from ODI on women in the gig economy showed that platforms can make finding work easier, provide women with much needed flexibility, which is particularly important given the disproportionate share of care work that women carry, at least for now. And they also show that these platforms may pay more. Second, e-commerce is helping women establish home-based businesses and expanding ones that already exist. The IFC found that women are turning to e-commerce to grow businesses and gain access to financial services that are embedded within many of these e-commerce services. Here too, flexibility was a prominent reason why women were turning to e-commerce. In Indonesia, as with other countries, women are more likely to have home-based businesses or micro retail shops where digitization could help them increase incomes and benefit their households. The digital economy is also transforming traditional sectors. The example on the right, looks at digitization of the agricultural supply chains in Kenya, where women make up the majority of farm labor. There are lots of examples there, and not sure you can read them from the screen, but just to highlight, digitization increased access to finance, it improved access to markets, and it increased income for women farmers on the whole. Next slide, please. So this has already been said a couple of times. So I think it bears repeating and repeating and repeating. Gender equal economies are stronger economies. While gender equal access and participation in and benefit from economic opportunities is important and powerful and a worthy goal all on its own, we also know that gender equality benefits entire nations, entire regions, and the global economy. Countries that rank higher in gender equality are wealthier and healthier than those that rank lower. For example, the IMF estimates that the gender gap in labor force participation cost the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia over 15% of their potential GDP. On this slide, you see data that speak to women's ability to participate in the digital economy. The orange line on the graph shows the gap between men and women. The data show consistently that countries where we see larger gender gaps in ID ownership, in phone ownership, in financial account ownership, you see lower GDP than those countries that enjoy more equal access. So if we want to reap the economic benefits of the digital economy, we have to proactively address the gaps that are preventing women's inclusion and empowerment in this digital economy. So what will it take? Next slide, please. So indeed, ensuring that government policies and services and private sector solutions are designed with women in mind, and ideally by women themselves, is going to be essential if we are to include and empower women in the digital economy and grow economies as a whole. This requires action across governments, across development partners, and across the private sector to increase access to the digital economy. But as Dr. Akiko said so powerfully, access alone is not enough. Equal access does not automatically mean equal benefit. It does not automatically mean equal representation, equal decision-making power, or equal participation. We must make sure that these systems and the products that ride on them and the services that we layer on them are also affordable, that they bring value to women customers, that we are addressing capability gaps that have been discussed already this morning, and we ensure that they are safe, secure, and trustworthy. These are the building blocks. These are the foundations that we should be checking our policies, programs, products, and the investments that we're making in all of those against. The interventions listed here are for sure illustrative. They are not exhaustive. For instance, cyber security and data security are critically important. As economies digitize, and they're not here on the slide, so acknowledging that. But I want to just linger here very briefly on the issue of social payments. As noted, digital payments are an essential part of the digital economy. And if economies are to be inclusive of women, then they must have access to and realize the benefits of digital payments. Digitizing social payments in particular is a powerful tool that governments and their financial services partners have to get women, and particularly low-income women who have been historically excluded, connected, onboarded into the digital economy. In this regard, I want to point out how Indonesia stands out as a global leader. Since President Jokowi mandated that social payments be digitized in 2017, more than 20 million social benefit recipients have opened their very first financial account. Most of these accounts are held by women, as we have heard, because not only were the payments digitized, but they were directed to women specifically. But governments everywhere must go beyond just digitizing payments to actively considering how those policies, the programs, and the payments that they're leveraging for them can actually truly empower women and build their opportunity and their resilience within the digital economy. The government of Indonesia...
excuse me, Jamie?
Yes?
You have 2 more minutes.
Good. Okay, thank you. The government of Indonesia is doing just that by reforming its social payments and now considering what design elements for those payments best support women's economic empowerment. Indonesia's new G2P, or government to person payments 4.0 digital transformation, is planning to give women a choice in providers, including the fintech and e-commerce firms that are supercharging the digital economy. Women will be empowered to choose products that best meet their needs, and empowered to choose providers who are willing to innovate to meet those needs. And this is actually really unique globally and something that needs to be underscored and celebrated. So by digitizing social payments, directing them to women, and designing them for women's needs, Indonesia is now leading the way, and I hope other countries will learn quickly from Indonesia's leadership. Next slide, please. So just in closing, at the Gates Foundation, we have a vision that by the end of the decade, women everywhere will enjoy equal, ubiquitous access to digital financial services, that they can use easily, safely, and with confidence to manage their complex daily lives and to aid in any of their aspirations, any of the hopes and dreams that they hold. To be sure, we are investing our resources and energy to achieve this vision of strong, gender equal digital economies. Yet it will also require commitment and partnership among all of us and all of us who are here today, the many others who are not with us at this forum, and it will require all of us to act with some audacity and urgency to get there. So we're really proud and grateful that we're sharing this vision with all of you, that we are on this journey with all of you, and we look forward to marching forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I think Jamie has highlighted important messages as well, including investing on women in digital economy and how important is that, as well as how digital economy can benefit women in their daily lives and create new jobs that will increase access to work and to finance. And of course, many more. And so last but definitely not least, I will invite Cecilia Tinonin to deliver her presentation. She will discuss opportunities and challenges in making financial inclusion work for women, including the effect of COVID-19 to micro small businesses. Cecilia is currently serving as statistics specialist at the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. She provides technical assistance and capacity development to national statistical offices and stakeholders to produce, disseminate, and use gender disaggregated data. Her areas of work include economic empowerment, paid and unpaid work, as well as gender and the environment. Cecilia, your 10 minutes starts right now.
Many thanks, Chandra. Good morning to all participants and distinguished guests and speakers, and many thanks for inviting us to this very important conversation on women participation in the digital economy. We're deeply honored to present today a fairly recent research on the effect of COVID-19 on micro and small digital businesses in Indonesia. Next slide, please. My presentation will focus on 4 sections. I will give a brief overview of the report. The second section shows the main findings. The third section provides recommendations stemming from the research. And the final section concludes with an overview of gender responses approaches to COVID-19 in Asia. Next slide, please. So soon after COVID-19 was declared a pandemic and lockdown regulations were put in place in the labor market in view of safety protocols, there was agreement to assess the consequences of the pandemic on the most vulnerable segment of the labor market, including micro and small businesses. And this was particularly important in countries such as Indonesia, where more than 90% of the workforce is actually employed in small and micro businesses, nearly half of which are actually owned or run by women. So we had 3 fairly simple but fundamental questions, such as what is the effect of COVID-19 on micro and small businesses, particularly those that are women-owned? Are women and men coping, and how are they coping? And to what extent does digitalization help? And what is the support required to ensure that women-owned micro and small businesses can survive the negative effect of the pandemic? We run this research in a collaborative manner with UN Pulse Lab Jakarta, Gojek, BPS, which is the National Statistical Office of Indonesia, and we also receive inputs, very important inputs from the Commission on National Strategy for Financial Inclusion of Indonesia for the research design. Next slide, please. To assess and these three fairly fundamental questions, we use three data sources. First, an online survey conducted by BPS. It was an online survey conducted in July 2020, targeting owners of businesses regardless of the size of the business. The second component was a big data analysis and online survey for micro and small businesses that we conducted in collaboration with Gojek in October 2020. And then we had qualitative component that focused on in-depth interviews with 40 respondents, 21 of which were platform users. Just a note of clarification, when we speak about digital platform in the report, we mean online businesses that mediate work or services between service providers and customers. So there is a tripartite relationship between the client, the platform that has an intermediary role, and the food vendor, driver, the businesses on the other side. The report focuses in particular on food and beverage sector and in Indonesia. Next slide, please. For those who are interested, here is the link to the report. Next slide, please. In terms of findings, despite more man-owned businesses in Indonesia, it's actually women-owned businesses that use the internet the most to sell product. The bar chart shows that, for instance, 68% of women-owned small businesses in comparison to 52 man-owned businesses actually use the internet to sell their product. Next slide, please. A second important finding is that COVID-19 has prompted micro and small businesses to go digital. If we compare, for instance, the period March-September 2019 with the period March-September 2020, just the Gojek platform saw an increase of 31% with new members using and joining the platform. The increase was not just in new membership, but was also relating to the intensity of the use of the platform, with 49% increasing their use of the platform to a daily basis. A second interesting feature of the slide is that women-owned micro businesses tend to use more platforms, not just one, but different social medias and platforms. Next slide, please. Who is benefiting the most of this increased digitalization during COVID? If we look at the left tail of the distribution of this graph, we see that young businesses that were created less than a year ago actually are benefiting the most, especially women-owned micro and small businesses who noted that the platform helped them not just survive, but also expand. Whereas the opposite is true for older businesses that are being established more, for instance, than 3-4 years ago, where man-owned businesses actually noted that the platform helped them expand. Next slide, please. However, being on a digital platform helps when women and men owners are actually using complementary business strategies. So signing up to the platform is definitely for the first time, and entering the digital world is actually obviously strategy number one. But then we have complementary strategies that are extremely helpful to make the business competitive, such as, for instance, changing the scope of the business to actually leverage customer preferences in the area, or, for instance, improving services for other users in the platform ecosystem to remain competitive in the platforms. For instance, offering discount, promotion deals, improving their service to delivery drivers and reducing drivers' waiting time. Or also leveraging digital applications, social media to actually direct more customers to the platform. Next slide, please. There are, however, also external factors that are crucial for allowing businesses to participate effectively in the digital economy. Obviously, smartphone ownership, technology facilitator, and the business location. These are particularly important for those kind of necessity business owners that actually distinguish themselves from growth-oriented micro and small businesses, in the sense that there are specific gender roles where the woman is actually in charge of the production of the product. For instance, the woman is cooking at home and the husband or the family members are actually selling the product on the street, which is different from growth-oriented micro and small businesses that are based on sizing a business opportunity, and where women actually have more decision-making power. These small businesses tend to have also employees, so the woman owner can actually focus on training and leveraging, for instance, the internet for attracting more customers. Next slide,
excuse me,
please.
Cecilia, you have 3
Yes.
more minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very important slide in the sense that it shows that man owners are more likely to apply a wider range of strategies to combat revenues loss with greater access to finance and assets compared to women. We definitely note that women, yes, they rely on digitalization, but more heavily probably than men. But when it comes to diversifying coping strategies during the pandemic, more women said they didn't have any coping strategy at all. And the access to finance and asset, as I said, was lower for women than men. Next slide, please. Also, in terms of recipient of the stimulus program, we noted among the 2,000 platform that the 2,000 micro small businesses that use the platform, that only few of them actually were recipient of stimulus programs in Indonesia. So if we move to the key findings, just to summarize, yes, digital platforms are helping micro and small businesses cope with the pandemic, with women-owned micro and small businesses benefiting the most. However, the extent to which digitalization could help depends on their business characteristics, complementary business strategies, and external factors. Digitalization alone is not enough to help micro and small businesses survive. We saw that men actually rely on wider range of strategies to combat revenue loss. Third, next slide, please. Third, digitalization is helping women and men owners balance work and home responsibilities, but this is less likely among women-owned necessity micro and small businesses. And fourth, many micro and small businesses in Indonesia are still offline, but access and affordability are not always the issue. So few recommendations stemming from the research are to invest in data collection and analysis. Next slide, please. And target women-owned micro and small businesses, particularly those in the informal sector that are actually hard to reach. Enhance access to technologies for women entrepreneurs, incorporate women-owned MSD prioritized in stimulus packages, address, obviously, the unequal distribution of unpaid domestic and care work to ensure women participation to the labor market and skills program, but also is important to leverage partnerships between government, private sector, and CSOs. So I'm going to end the presentation here. Thank you so much, and over to you, Chandra.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. I think this study is very interesting, which focuses on women's micro small businesses, and you mentioned the importance of tripartite relation on digital platform within the businesses, and also the recommendation is also interesting, which I think one of the challenge in Indonesia and I think in ASEAN countries is data collection, gender disaggregated data collection, and we need to invest on that. Now, on that note, we are going to move on to the next session of this panel discussion, which is the Q&A. So we've heard the presentations from our esteemed panelists. And as mentioned earlier, some of our participants have submitted their questions, while others have submitted their question in the Q&A box of this platform. And now I will go through them with our panelists. The first round of question, I will read 4 questions, 1 question each for each panelist, and then we can have start the discussion. So the first question is for Professor Akiko. This question is from Ibu Hendriani Silalahi of Kowani. The question is how to ensure that women participation is not being held back by the digital gaps. As we are aware, most areas of ASEAN countries consist of large segments of rural population, which still lack adequate access and development to skills and infrastructure. So this question is to you, Professor Akiko. And then next question is for Ibu Leni. This question is from Dr. Dewi Hanggraini, Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business of the Paramadina University. The question is, what are the concrete steps for an agile action plan and roadmap to empower the role of women, especially as entrepreneurs, with various risks that must be mitigated in post-pandemic to improve the welfare of the families? The third question is for Jamie Zimmerman. This is from Ibu Ratna Suyudi of Kowani. And the question is how to increase women's literacy in digital economy, as in Indonesia, we still experience gender divide in terms of technology access and usage. And the fourth question for Cecilia, this is from Dr. Dewi Hanggraini, Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Paramadina. The question is how to mitigate cyber risks and fraud in the context of promoting women's economic empowerment in rapidly evolving digital economy post-pandemic. Now I will start from Professor Akiko to answer the question. Professor?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
clear.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a good question. I think that there are two things very important for this. And one is the politics. And as we are going to encourage Minister of Finance of Indonesia, who are trying to do the support of financially and also training for the rural people as well as local people. So I think that this challenge should be introduced for the other part of the ASEAN as well as Asia Pacific countries. Pacific means Asian countries, which I think that they would like to know more about what kind of policy Indonesia is challenging. And second thing is our network. The worldwide network, diversified network, is very important because information sharing is really important for us to learn new technology, and also practical advice, which we can really share. And the third one is we need some mental support each other. So that is the reason why we need a kind of worldwide network. Actually, this morning, I learned that I am illiteracy of even using this digital webinar, I think that meeting, because I have done it so many times, but today I am not in the office, I'm in my hometown. So that's why I don't know how to put the background paper. So many people at the office, at the, I think that the sponsor and also organizer helped me. And also at the beginning of my speech, the slides are mixed up. So if we are going to really try to access to the new technology, we found out that many things has happened, but we can help, we can support each other very much. So that's why I think that really appreciate the challenge of Indonesian Minister of Finance, and also this kind of actually meeting can really make a network stronger. And Kowani is one of the biggest women's organization in Indonesia, and they are all, I think, that digital entrepreneurship people. So I don't have to worry about Kowani, but Kowani can provide the local people and also neighboring country that what they have faced and how they have learned. So I think that one just last thing that I remember, Professor Kenneth Galbraith, past Galbraith, who was the professor of Harvard University, very famous economist, said to me when I met him the second time, just before the 21st century, so 1997, he said, there are three issues in the 21st century. One, the rich and the poor problem. Two, nuclear issues. Three, traditional discrimination such as religion, race, nationality, gender, and so on. So we are still facing the same thing at this moment. So I think women's power can really change from the traditional discrimination to more fair world community. If possible, and not if possible, we have to do it.
Okay, thank you, Professor Akiko. I think over to Ibu Leni. Your question is about the concrete steps for an agile action plan or roadmap to empower the role of women with various risks that must be mitigated post-pandemic.
Thank you, Bu Chandra. Allow me to answer in Bahasa, ya.
Yes.
So I can, because there is a translator here. Thank you.
Translators here, yes, Ibu Leni.
Yeah. So the questions comes from Ibu Dewi, yeah. Whether what are the concrete steps for an agile action plan or roadmap to empower the role of women, especially as entrepreneurs. So allow me answer in Bahasa Indonesia. Jadi ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak sekalian, ya, ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak sekalian, saya ingin menyampaikan bahwa tadi di dalam presentasi saya menyampaikan bahwa ada 5 arahan presiden yang sangat konkret ya, terutama untuk memberdayakan perempuan dan melindungi anak-anak yang ditujukan kepada kementerian kami, dan tentunya dalam mewujudkan ini kita bekerja sama dengan seluruh kementerian lembaga terkait ya, tadi pentahelix ya, kami bekerja sama dengan pentahelix, dan salah satu prioritas utama adalah meningkatkan pemberdayaan perempuan di bidang ekonomi, khususnya dalam hal kewirausahaan. Ya, jadi kita diminta untuk mencetak sebanyak mungkin wirausaha baru, atau bagi wirausaha yang sudah ada ditingkatkan, di-upgrade ya, untuk meningkat kelasnya. Dan di dalam kita melakukan proses ini, perspektif gender atau lensa gender menjadi bagian utama yang harus diintegrasikan. Jadi upaya ini selain kita lakukan bekerja sama dengan kementerian lembaga, juga lembaga internasional dan juga NGO, semuanya ya mendukung. Dan di dalam proses ini kami melakukannya terutama di tingkat desa. Ya, jadi di tingkat desa, di mana kita ingin merespon juga strategi nasional keuangan inklusi, di mana sebagian besar perempuan di tingkat desa yang masih lag untuk substansi digital ekonomi maupun literasi tentang keuangan. Jadi kita fokus di desa, dan kita tahun lalu kita juga melakukan kerjasama dengan Kementerian Desa, ya, dan kita melatih pendamping untuk yang ada di desa, ya. Dan pada saat kita melakukan pelatihan kewirausahaan ini, tadi saya sampaikan bahwa kita juga melatih isu-isu yang terkait dengan perempuan, ya. Jadi isu gender juga kita latihkan. Bagaimana dia juga harus memahami regulasi, bagaimana dia harus memahami tentang hal-hal yang terkait dengan keluarga, isu keluarga ya, isu pengasuhan, violence, kekerasan terhadap perempuan dan anak, dan isu-isu lainnya yang itu juga mempengaruhi kehidupan dia sehari-hari. Jadi kita bekerja sama dan dilakukannya di tingkat desa. Jadi kalau sebetulnya poinnya itu yang langkah konkret kan ada 3 ya, selain tadi ada kredit dan lain sebagainya. Itu yang penting adalah kita mendampingi perempuan di desa untuk aspek digital teknologinya dan financial literacy-nya, termasuk juga infrastruktur yang ada di desa. Nah, untuk infrastruktur ini tentunya kementerian terkait ya, Kementerian Komunikasi dan Informatika, itu yang menjadi leading-nya. Tetapi untuk melatih para perempuan ini, kami bekerja sama dengan Kementerian Desa. Jadi memang sudah berjalan di pilot ya, di setiap kabupaten ada 2 desa yang kita jadikan pilot. Karena Indonesia memiliki 74.961 desa. Ya, jadi ini sebuah angka yang besar, dan oleh sebab itu kami melakukan pilot di setiap 2 desa dari setiap kabupaten kota, dan alokasi dana desa yang disediakan oleh negara, oleh pemerintah itu bisa digunakan untuk ini. Ya, jadi inilah salah satu bentuk kolaborasi kami dengan berbagai kementerian, dan memasukkan lensa gender di sana, sehingga perempuan yang akan mendapat benefit, karena perempuan memang yang jauh tertinggal di dalam akses digital ini maupun akses keuangan. Nah, dengan terbitnya Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusi Perempuan, ya, kita Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusi ada di dalam Peraturan Presiden ya, nomor 114 tahun 2020, tapi juga ada Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusi untuk perempuan. Nah, jadi ini mendorong lebih cepat lagi, sehingga kita bekerja samanya dengan lintas kementerian juga semakin kuat lagi. Jadi komponen-komponen yang ada di sana, ada roadmap-nya juga, ya, rencana aksinya, indikator-indikatornya, dan ini juga menjadi program kerja tidak hanya Kementerian PPPA saja. Ya, jadi kami welcome dari semua pihak untuk mendukung memberdayakan perempuan di bidang ekonomi, untuk mencetak wirausaha perempuan, sehingga diharapkan nanti kalau mereka semakin meningkat pendapatannya, ini akan memberikan dampak kepada peningkatan kesejahteraan keluarganya, dan tentunya pada wilayah di mana dia berada, dan secara akhirnya pada tingkat nasional. Jadi di forum ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Women tahun ini kami juga ingin memperkenalkan Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusi khusus perempuan ini, karena ini baru yang pertama ada di dunia ya, bahkan ya, khusus perempuan ini, dan kami juga sekaligus meminta masukan dari berbagai negara untuk bisa bagaimana Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusi ini bisa dalam pelaksanaannya bisa memberikan manfaat yang maksimal bagi perempuan Indonesia. Jadi kita punya 135 juta perempuan di Indonesia, dan hampir 60%-nya itu di usia produktif, yang mana ini sangat merupakan potensi bagi kita untuk kita kembangkan. Itu mungkin. Terima kasih Bu Chandra.
Terima kasih Bu Leni. Pada intinya pemerintah, the government, the Indonesian government have increased women empowerment programs to increase women empowerment in entrepreneurship. This is using gender lens, and this starts at the village level to assist in financial and digital literacy. And this program have been piloted in 2 villages in each districts using village budgeting. And okay, I will move on to Jamie. Your question is on women's digital literacy in digital economy.
Great, thank you for that, and I'll try to keep it brief. You know, this is such a very important issue, and I think it's been brought up, I think, by every single speaker about financial literacy, digital literacy. We do see some major gaps in gender gaps in digital and financial literacy and digital financial literacy. I think, you know, my answer to the question is really that I would like for us to expand our definition and view beyond literacy, and understand that it's really not just about whether a woman is digitally literate, financially literate, but it's actually more around capabilities. And I think about the digital financial capability and financial capability, not just about the knowledge, but about the skills, the attitudes, the behaviors that all come together that to enable not only what she knows, but her confidence and her trust in the products and services, the systems that she's working with, her options, her ability to exercise her choice, and having the ability to solve problems when they go wrong. And I think a lot of times there's been decades of research on financial literacy programs that have by and large shown that they work not well at all. And I think part of what we see is that we are building literacy programs to teach women how to be financially literate on financial systems that were never meant to work for them, that were not designed for them, to use products and services that are not accessible to them, and that were not designed with their needs in mind. And then expecting them to, through financial literacy training, now all of a sudden use these products that are not solving problems for them. And so I think that if we can expand our view to think about the types of barriers that women face, how to make the systems work for them, and then consider a more expansive view of literacy to think about the different, biases and barriers that women are confronted with, and then how do we design the types of products and services that meet their needs, we often will find that they're able to figure it out. And it doesn't require loads of literacy training in order to get there. And so that's, I think that when we get into the elements of not just the literacy barrier, but in addressing the issues of confidence in the ability to use digital financial services and other types of financial products and other tools within the digital economy, confidence to use them, but also confidence that we know how to navigate them and that we are empowered to solve problems when things go wrong, I think that'll go a really long way. What I would also say is when we're able to do that, that also provides us with new opportunities to innovate how we engage in that kind of capability building. So meeting women where they are, real-time application of use of solving problems or testing out products or trying things out in low risk and real-time environments, so that you're not decoupling literacy training from the actual interaction with the platforms, the products, the services in the system. So that helps, I think, a lot with behavioral biases and other types of skills building over time, and building kind of confidence, trust, and new habits and ways of interacting in a digital way. And that is really required. So just in sum, I think, it's critically important. There are huge gaps there. We're going to really have a lot of challenges if we don't address some of the capability gaps we see in digital capability, financial capability, and digital financial capability. But I think we need to be thinking about it more expansively and actually meeting women where they are, as opposed to punishing them for not knowing how to use systems that were never meant to work for them. Over.
Yes, that's a good point, Jamie. So moving beyond literacy and more towards increased capabilities. Now, for Cecilia, I have to make a correction for the question. The question to you is, can you share with us the best practice for sex disaggregated data that ASEAN country can learn to do? So that's the question. Over to you, Cecilia.
Many thanks, Chandra, and apologies for not turning on my video, but the weather is very unstable right now and affects my connectivity, so apologies.
Yes, not to worry.
With regard to the first question, I mean, obviously I'm a statistician, but I would like to remind the audience, actually the recommendation of the Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Financial for Development and remarks at the first Asian Women Leaders Summit in 2020. The first recommendation was indeed to advance regulatory frameworks supportive of digital financial services, including ensuring a level playing field for banks and non-bank actors to responsibly provide payment and other financial services, simplified customer onboarding, and rules on use of agents. Second, to improve digital payment infrastructure, such as payment systems, interoperability, and ensuring that all government-to-person payments are digitized. Third, ensuring that women are not deprived of participation in the digital economy through equal access to this infrastructure, particularly through mobile devices and connectivity. Fourth, building regulatory capacity to assess the evolution of innovative financial services. And finally, fitting digital literacy and smart financial consumer protection for the digital age in order to ensure that the digital divides are not exacerbated. In terms of, so there is a strong focus, obviously, on regulatory capacity and regulatory frameworks when we speak about the digital economy. In terms of sex disaggregated data, UN Women has very recently published a report on SDGs disaggregated data that in the Asian countries. I'm going to share the link into the chat, and just highlighting that when we speak about disaggregation and gender data, sex is not the only variable that we need to take into account when we want to reach individuals and groups in vulnerable situations. So nested disaggregation, meaning multi-level disaggregation, is extremely important to, for instance, shed light on ethnic groups, age groups, urban, rural, that really allow for an intersectoral, an intersection assessment of gender gaps. So I hope you can share the link with the participant. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Cecilia. And is this include types of disabilities as well? Is this included in the disaggregation of data?
Yes, when it is possible, because the disaggregation of data requires actually quite extensive sample size. Right. So the issue indeed is to allow for the data source to be able to disaggregate the data and the indicators at different levels. So when that's possible to have accurate and precise estimates, then that was included. But when the data source did not allow for reliable estimates, because, for instance, of sample size issues, then obviously it was not presented. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I think the participant will find the information that Cecilia's sharing in the link, the paper. Interesting, very interesting. And now I think we can move on to the second round of questions. I will read a set of questions again for each of the panelists. And I was just informed by the organizer that there is a correction that Ibu Dewi Hanggraini, one of the participants who asked question on the first round, is actually from the University of Pertamina. So apology, Ibu Dewi Hanggraini. Now, the first question for the second round for Professor Akiko is from Gemala Melayu. Now, the question is how to empower women to fulfill children's rights, including health, education, and social life, while women still consider only a supporting system, not the primary system. So that's the question. And secondly, for Ibu Leni, this question is from Ibu Indra Stuti. The question is, lacking access to financial institutions and financial literacy leads to some women trapped in illegal financial technology. Now, how to minimize this problem? And then question for Jamie. This is from Julia Ajmoni. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. The question is, what can we do to encourage more women to take part in the digital economy? So this is more a practical question. And question to Cecilia, this is from Aulia Cloridiani. The question is, it is challenging for women to take opportunities in the digital economy. Moreover, as the implication of the COVID-19 pandemic, many types of research showed more women were forced to be breadwinners for their families, whether their husband passed away, being sick, or losing their jobs. What's your opinion about this? Okay, I will start with Professor Akiko. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very essential questions. I think that can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I think that there are very, very important but very difficult matter to deal with. But please think of, in Japan we have M-shaped life of the women, which means 29 years old, they stop working and get into the house and childbearing and also these kind of houseworks. And then 45 years old, they come back again, but almost all of them are part-time job because they can't come back to the full-time job because of the, I think that the really long time away from the society. But I think it is very important. It's not necessary that every woman have to work because of the childbearing is really depend on your actually your choice. So I think we have provided the opportunity to choose your own life. You'd like to be housewife and support your family must be, if you are happy with that, that'll be all right. But if you're not happy, you can choose to do both. In order to do so, one thing very much necessary is education of boys, how you should deal with your wife, how you should deal with women. Because if we will try to really make the men to change their mind or their values, it's so difficult. I have two boys. Well, actually, they are grown up, but I have two sons. But I try to teach them how to take care of women and how to deal with women. And I found out that both of them are very happy lives with working women and with children. So I think I found out really truly education for boys is very, very important. And also women have to really think, not a narrow-minded education, but women also have to choose your own life. But in order to choose your own life, the facility and your environment must be support. You can really pursue both childbearing and also your own professions. I think it's much better than before, but still it's not enough. So it really depends on how the babysitting system is over there, or what kind of financial, I think, that support you can get. So all of them are very much, I think that we have to work together to really make the education changed and also to open up the mind of women. But the important thing is you can choose.
Yes, thank you, Professor Akiko. I think it's important to make boys or men partners and supporters for gender equality and women empowerment from the very beginning. And Ibu Leni, over to you for the question.
Terima kasih Bu Chandra. Tadi pertanyaannya tentang
how to minimize the problem of women trapped in illegal fintech, Ibu.
Ya. Jadi sebetulnya kita nih juga memiliki ini ya, kesenjangan gender dalam STEM ya. Science, teknologi, maths ya. Nah, jadi tidak hanya meningkatkan, yang penting tidak hanya meningkatkan peran perempuan dalam STEM, tetapi juga bagaimana mengatasi kendala yang mereka hadapi pada saat memasuki jenjang pendidikan dan kesempatan kerja di bidang STEM. Jadi kalau kita mendengar fenomena leaky pipelines, ya, ini bagaimana kita bisa meminimalkan ini. Jadi kami bekerja sama juga tentunya dengan Kementerian Pendidikan ya untuk turut mempromosikan para perempuan untuk bisa lebih banyak lagi di bidang STEM ini. Dan tentunya untuk mengatasi hal ini kita sudah dan akan terus melakukan ini beberapa step ya. Pertama, mendukung kampanye transformatif untuk mendorong minat perempuan di bidang STEM. Karena dari perempuan sendiri terkadang juga dia tidak mau memilih STEM ini sebagai bidang studi dia gitu. Nah, ini yang juga tentunya diperlukan kampanye transformatif, meningkatkan pemahaman bagi para perempuan sehingga mereka mau dan berminat untuk masuk di bidang STEM ini. Kemudian yang kedua adalah kita mempromosikan profil perempuan yang menjadi pemimpin di bidang STEM melalui media dan publik. Jadi ini penting sehingga bisa memberikan inspirasi ya bagi para perempuan, terutama perempuan yang masih muda-muda dan juga perempuan di pelosok tanah air, di perdesaan, sehingga mereka dari pemimpin di bidang STEM tadi mereka mempunyai inspirasi dan kemudian mudah-mudahan bisa mendorong, dan ini ditunjukkan oleh beberapa data kami yang terbukti untuk itu. Kemudian yang berikutnya juga mendukung berbagai bentuk inisiasi yang dipimpin perempuan dalam bentuk pelatihan dan mentorship. Nah, ini sangat penting juga ya, karena terkadang apabila ada minat pada diri perempuan itu tetapi tidak dibarengi dengan pelatihan dan mentorship, ini akhirnya para perempuan tadi juga akhirnya mengundurkan diri, tidak jadi masuk lagi ke STEM tadi. Nah, jadi ini tentu kita bekerja sama dengan para pihak yang bekerja di pelatihan dan menyediakan mentorship bagi para perempuan, dan kita juga termasuk menyasar perempuan-perempuan yang ada di eastern part of Indonesia ya, dan di pedesaan. Kemudian kita juga memberikan apresiasi kepada perusahaan yang mengadopsi praktik kesetaraan gender dan mempromosikan lingkungan atau tempat kerja yang ramah perempuan dan mendukung kesetaraan gender. Jadi ini banyak sekali ya dilakukan, baik itu di tingkat perusahaan secara individual maupun secara kolektif di dalam sebuah kawasan perusahaan. Jadi Kementerian Pemberdayaan Perempuan bekerja sama dengan beberapa perusahaan seperti membangun ruang perlindungan perempuan. Jadi ini turut mendukung perempuan sehingga perempuan tadi bisa berkontribusi juga ya. Jadi terkait dengan literasi digital pada perempuan dan terkait juga dengan sejalan dengan pemerintah membangun infrastruktur untuk teknologi ke seluruh pelosok tanah air. Ini tadi saya sudah sebutkan bahwa kementerian kami juga melakukan pelatihan untuk menutup gap di dalam digital gap ini, terutama bagi para perempuan yang berada di tingkat pedesaan. Ya, jadi kita punya salah satu program nasional yang penting, yaitu Desa Ramah Perempuan dan Peduli Anak. Jadi Desa Ramah Perempuan dan Peduli Anak inilah yang ingin mengangkat dan memberdayakan perempuan di tingkat desa di seluruh Indonesia sehingga mereka mempunyai skill ya, mereka menjadi wirausaha dan mereka berdaya di berbagai bidang pembangunan, tidak hanya ekonomi tetapi di antaranya adalah termasuk pengetahuan mereka tentang digital ekonomi dan literasi keuangan ini. Okay. Itu mungkin beberapa yang bisa kami sampaikan.
Baik, thank you, Ibu Leni. I think one of the effort by the Indonesian government is to provide training to narrow the digital gaps, especially for women in villages. This includes in the, for example, in programs on women and child-friendly villages that has been going on for years already. And now I will move on to Jamie. Jamie, you can answer your question.
All right, thank you so much, Julia, for the question. And just wanting to note, unfortunately, it's quite late here. And as the mother of two young boys myself, I'm going to have to drop after I answer this question so that I have the opportunity to have my work-life balance and say goodnight to them. So yes. Thank you for your grace and flexibility with that. I was very inspired, Professor Yamanaka, with your reflections on raising boys. And I hope that that I will be able to do the same with mine as they grow. So Julia, to your great question about how we can encourage women to take part in the digital economy, it's a huge question, and I hope that the conversations that we've had today across all the panelists and speakers have inspired you with some ideas. You know, I think that as a kind of on surface level, there are lots of things that we could do, very practically speaking, to encourage women to participate. We've been hearing a lot about different types of incentive programs, policies that are being put into place, fora for discussing how to design policies, products, infrastructure, and make the investments that'll make these things work for women. I think that there's a lot to say for knowing where the women are and what they need. And so what are their jobs, and how do we make the digital economy something that that they can link to their jobs and improve their livelihoods? How do we link it to what they need and do every day, whether it's caring for their children or managing household expenses or things like education, health, paying bills? So thinking about those use cases of what is meaningful for women and what reduces a burden that she has. So, if this is kind of we're thinking about all the ways we can build supply by addressing the policy challenges, addressing the infrastructure challenges that women face, and some very real gender barriers and huge gaps. We talked about the financial inclusion gap for women. There's also a huge digital identification gap, a 15 percentage point gap in women having access to digital IDs or identification overall. And it's very difficult to participate formally in the digital economy or have a digital financial service if you are not able to identify yourself. And that is a real gap. So, and then all the way down to bias, discrimination, longstanding social norms that send the signal to women that this isn't for her. This is not meant for you. And that is something that we've seen in our user profile type research, demand type research over time, that we have to figure out how to not just break down that perception, but actually fix the systems and policies and services that are sending her those messages. It's not in her head. It wasn't meant for her, and we have to fix that. And so I think that there are very practical things that we can do that would be great interventions to encourage to refine and have better products and services and better kind of foundational enabling factors, like enabling foundations that would help this work better for women. But I think there's some more foundational stuff that we still really need to work on at the systemic level. And I think we have to do all of the above. And do it, all at the same time. So, I'd say, there are lots of great resources. Just in closing on this, MicroSave has produced a lot of them on amazing toolkits and other types of guidance for including women in the digital economy. UNCDF is another entity, Women's World Banking, that's very active in Indonesia, have been producing a lot of great guidance connected to the G20 and UN Women and the Generation Equality Forum. There's also a Reaching Financial Equality call to action with a 10-point plan for how to achieve financial equality globally at an accelerated pace. So all of those institutions and reports and the many others that have been shared in the chat and talked about today, I encourage us all to voraciously absorb those and continue these conversations and get creative and come up with solutions. And like I said, I think it's going to be all hands on deck. We're going to have to all work together to address all these multifaceted barriers. They're coming at us from all angles. And it includes bringing men to the table too, and having them be the allies and champions, and make the space and seats for us to come in and start to make those decisions ourselves. And I think that, you know, once we get there, things will start moving a whole lot faster. So thank you very much for including me in this conversation. It has been such a pleasure, and I apologize for having to sneak off the virtual stage before the event is over, but it has been a real pleasure to be here with you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Do you have closing statement, or?
That was it.
That was it. Okay. Thank you and good night, and say hi to your children. Okay, I think we can move. Again, thank you so much for Jamie for her insightful answers. We need to move on to Cecilia. Cecilia, the question is your opinion about the challenge that women have to take in the digital economic opportunities, especially because women during the pandemic have been forced into being breadwinners of the house. Cecilia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chandra. Obviously, I represent an organization, so that is very much opinionated, obviously, on what are actually the effect of the pandemic on women and girls. And yes, UN Women definitely is advocating for a more gender-sensitive recovery from the COVID-19, because indeed, women and girls are the one paying the highest price of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been at the forefront of providing evidence on the effect of the pandemic on women and girls and men and boys through rapid gender assessment surveys, so data collection. In Asia Pacific, we conducted them soon after the pandemic COVID-19 was declared a pandemic in 11 countries in the region. I will share the link to the report as well later on. And what this gender data is telling us is that women are indeed taking on the great bulk of increased unpaid domestic and care work that was triggered by the pandemic, with homeschooling, increased domestic work, increased care work, even providing unpaid medical care to the sick and the illness within the household. And this has resulted in worsening of mental health with increased stress and negative state of being and mental health. And also we see in the region, but also globally, that women are more likely to lose their jobs. And actually, there is global evidence that shows that the labor force participation for women is decreasing substantially, meaning not just the employment rate, but even unemployment rate. So women are not even looking or are not available any longer to work. So when we look what are the solutions, obviously women participation in COVID-19 task force would be critical to ensure that the needs of marginalized groups, such as, for instance, women and girls, are included in the development, planning, and budgeting of COVID-19 response and recovery. But when we look, for instance, at the Asian region, we see that across 11 COVID-19 task force, only in 8 ASEAN member states, women represent only 25% or less in this COVID-19 task force. 3 out of 11 do not have women representation at all. When we look, for instance, at adoption of gender-sensitive measures in COVID-19 response, we see that in 9 out of 10 Asian member states, indeed, policy measures for COVID-19 response have addressed violence against women, which has also been increasing during COVID-19, but only 4 Asian member states have addressed target measure to tackle women's economic security and empowerment. And when we look at direct support to unpaid care work, we see that only 3 member states have adopted specific measures. So indeed, tackling the gender gaps in the consequences of COVID-19 needs also to ensure that women have a seat at the table to influence the policies and COVID-19 response, so that rights of women in the region and beyond are actually observed and enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. And I think we can move on to the last question. This is for Ibu Leni. Ibu Leni, this question is from Bapak Wahyu Susilo from the Migrant Care. Now the question is, in Indonesia, most remittance are from women migrant workers. So the question is, what is the Indonesian government strategy for the protection of women migrant workers, as well as to strengthen economic empowerment and gender equality?
Ya, terima kasih. Sebetulnya terkait dengan migrant workers ini juga menjadi salah satu target ya dari strategi nasional keuangan inklusi perempuan khususnya. Itu tertuang di sana bahwa ada 4 kategori ya perempuan, salah satunya adalah perempuan pekerja migran, dan betul sekali bahwa remitansi mereka itu harus kita upayakan untuk bisa memberikan manfaat ya bagi perempuan itu sendiri dan bagi keluarganya tentunya, karena mereka akan melakukan menjadi pekerja di luar negeri itu kan tujuannya tentu untuk memperbaiki ekonomi keluarganya dan juga tentunya ingin agar mereka lebih sejahtera, kan begitu ya. Nah, salah satu karena itu merupakan salah satu dari target dari Strategi Nasional Keuangan Inklusi Perempuan atau SNKI Perempuan, dan itu juga sudah diatur di dalam strategi nasional tersebut, sehingga ini menjadi karena dia menjadi target ya, jadi seluruh program kerja yang ada di SNKI Perempuan itu tentunya berlaku juga. Selain tadi yang 40% perempuan yang berada pada kuantil terendah ya, kemudian ada perempuan kepala keluarga ya, juga perempuan pekerja migran ini. Nah, ini tentunya seluruh rencana kerja yang ada di sana juga menjadi bagian dari target tersebut. Nah, kami Kementerian Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Perlindungan Anak Republik Indonesia ini kembali lagi ingin menjawab isu-isu juga yang ada di tingkat desa, karena para pekerja migran ini kalau kita lihat dari sisi mereka di mana mereka tinggal, sebagian besar dari mereka adalah tinggal di desa. Nah, tentunya pelatihan-pelatihan untuk meningkatkan skill mereka, akses dan memberikan akses mereka terhadap keuangan sehingga mereka juga bisa menggunakan uang remitansi dengan lebih bijak ya, dan juga memberikan pelatihan setelah mereka kembali ke tanah air untuk memanfaatkan remitansi uang hasil mereka itu kepada hal-hal yang produktif. Ini juga menjadi hal yang kita latihkan kepada para perempuan pedesaan tersebut. Jadi kita bekerja sama dengan teman-teman NGO yang selama ini bekerja di tingkat akar rumput ya, untuk bagaimana kita meningkatkan pemberdayaan perempuan di bidang ekonomi, dan tentunya salah satunya ini adalah perempuan pekerja migran ya, dan sebenarnya kita punya beberapa target yang tadi saya sebutkan, termasuk perempuan penyintas kekerasan, penyintas bencana, dan perempuan kepala keluarga yang menjadi tulang punggung ekonomi, khususnya mereka yang berada pada keluarga yang miskin. Nah, kemudian yang berikutnya adalah melalui intervensi desa. Itu tadi saya sudah sempat sebutkan, desa ramah perempuan dan peduli anak itu menjadi salah satu jawaban untuk bagaimana kita memberdayakan para perempuan tersebut. substansi materi yang diajarkan kepada mereka. Dan satu hal yang penting adalah kita memberikan pendampingan bagi para perempuan tersebut, karena kita tidak bisa hanya melatih saja, tetapi kita harus mendampingi mereka. Dan inilah kerjasama kami dengan teman-teman di NGO. Semoga perempuan tersebut tadi karena didampingi sehingga diharapkan ada memberikan nilai tambah, dan ini juga kita pantau dan kita evaluasi. Jadi ke depan akan terus kita perkuat ini. Mudah-mudahan semakin banyak perempuan yang berdaya dari sisi ekonomi, terutama dalam kita di era semuanya sudah serba digital ini. Ya, tantangannya cukup berat juga karena bagi mereka harga alat-alat komunikasi misalnya untuk memberi HP itu kan cukup mahal untuk mereka ya, sehingga ini beberapa tantangan. Belum lagi jaringan yang juga masih dalam proses untuk dicapai, dikembangkan sehingga mampu mencapai seluruh wilayah, terutama di pelosok, itu juga sedang dalam proses semua. Intinya pemerintah bersama-sama mitra terus melakukan upaya ini. Itu mungkin Bu Chandra, terima kasih.
Ya, baik, terima kasih Ibu Leni. I think to conclude, based on the discussions, the presentation, the question and answer session, what we can see is there are work that needs to be done at all levels to increase women's empowerment in digital economy, as well as women's entrepreneurship capabilities. And this includes all women, involving women with disabilities, indigenous women, and women that come from lower quintile families. And ASEAN countries will address this issue based on their own political, economic, and social dynamics, but as a region, will support each other to promote digital economy especially for women empowerment and gender equality. And that, ladies and gentlemen, conclude our discussion this morning. Thank you kindly, our distinguished panelists, for the fruitful discussion. Hopefully, the result can be discussed even further during the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Women that will be commencing next week. Back to you, Vina.
Thank you, Mbak Chandra Sugarda, and thank you to the esteemed panelists for making such an important dialogue for us all. I am now inviting our country director of MSc in Indonesia, Ibu Grace Retnowati, to deliver the webinar's closing remark. Ibu Grace, the time is yours.
Thank you, Vina, for the Thank you, Vina, for the time given. Her Excellency Minister Bintang Puspayoga, Her Excellency Minister Sri Mulyani, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor of delivering the closing remarks of what has been a most remarkable and insightful webinar. I believe this webinar has done what it sought to do by providing a platform for sharing experiences and lessons learned in the delivery of a gender-responsive and socially inclusive women economic empowerment programs and policies, and helping to lay the foundations for aligning key regional commitments for building a more gender-inclusive digital economy. At the beginning of this webinar, we heard remarks from Her Excellency Minister Bintang Puspayoga and Minister Sri Mulyani that were thought-provoking and laid a perfect foundation for stimulating the discussions that ensued. The plenary sessions and discussions have effectively addressed issues pertaining to impact on the pandemic on women in the Asian regions, opportunities and challenges in making financial inclusions for work for women, Asians as well as Indonesia priorities, strategies, and commitment in accelerating women economic empowerment in the region, and international best practices and policies to accelerating women economic empowerment in digital economy. Our collective experiences shared today confirm that the pandemic has deepened pre-existing inequalities, disproportionately affected women, pushing them out of both formal and informal employment and businesses, and in some cases from the financial system, further widening the gender gap in access to finance and economic opportunities. This has further reduced their capacity to absorb economic shock. In addition, the burden of unpaid work care and domestic work significantly increased for most women during the pandemic. How do we then move forward from here to address the widening gender gap in women access to economic opportunities in the increasingly digital economy? The pandemic may have unleashed an unprecedented hardship, but it also presents an opportunity to rebuild our economies by putting women and girls at the center of all recovery effort. At MSG, we have constantly worked at it and believe that all of us collectively need to build local and global partnership for increasing opportunities for women. Mainstream gender in all our regulatory, policy, and programmatic effort. Strengthen evidence-based policy making through better gender disaggregated data. All measures to stimulate the new digital economy from credit to cash transfers must be targeted at women. Expand social safety nets for women and recognize and redistribute unpaid work. This will help us to recover faster and build a better future for everyone. Making real progress will require not just incremental, but bold action of all of this and many more fronts. This webinar itself is a step in that direction. I note that this Asian Ministerial Meeting on Women, AMMW, intends to develop a policy summary note from this webinar. This Road to AMMW webinar has been a strategic avenue to advocate effort going forward as we work toward inclusive, sustainable, and resilient economic recovery in our various jurisdictions. On behalf of MSG, I would like to thank the Indonesian Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection, the Indonesian Ministry of Finance, AMMW Committee, Asian Committee on Women, or AZW, Asian Secretariat, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, ERIA, UN Women, Inkemaris and Associate for their support in organizing this event, the hardworking team at MSG, and all who have contributed in diverse ways to make this webinar a big success. And most importantly, I would like to thank all participants for your active participations in this webinar. Without your input, ideas, and discussion, this would not have been a success. Let us continue to work together to bridge the gap and increase opportunities, choices, and voice and agency for women in this new digital post-pandemic world. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ibu Grace. Now allow me again to take this moment for a closing photo opportunity of all speakers, moderator, and guests in the panelist Zoom room. Please, can you open your camera and smile for the photo? Okay, on my count, 1, 2, 3. Another one, on my count, 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you. And that is the end of our webinar. We hope you have enjoyed the conversation. We have learned so much from today's webinar, the igniting dialogue and exchange of learnings and best practices with regards to increasing women's participation and strengthening women's access to digital economy. We hope this webinar has been a valuable session of sharing and learning. You can see the recording of this webinar on the YouTube channel of MicroSave Consulting or the Indonesian Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection. We thank you for your participation in this webinar. Goodbye and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ibu. Thank you so much, Akiko.
For all the panelists, thank you so much.
Ibu Leni, Ibu Chandra.
Thank you so much.
Ini sama Bu tetap di tempat ya.
You appreciate all organizers.
Thank you, Prof. Akiko.
Thank you so much, Prof. Akiko.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Cecilia.
Cecilia.
Bye-bye. Have a
Bye.
good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mbak
Cecilia.
Missy.
Bye now.
Ada hadir.
Thank you, Mbak Chandra. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Ibu Leni dan Ibu Grace
Ibu
tetap di
Leni.
tempat.
Oh, oke.
Oh, iya.
Ya.
Baik, saya leave ya.
Terima kasih Mbak Chandra.
Terima kasih.
Makasih Mbak Chandra.
Terima kasih Bu Chandra.
Jadi kita ke sana ya, Bu.